Greetings, I'm Karen Colligan, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. There's one thing I know, it's that every single leader is unique. There's no single way to lead, and your leadership style is shaped by your experiences, by your values, and by your strengths. And that's why this podcast exists. We bring in leaders from all walks of life to answer the same 6 questions, revealing their unique approaches to leadership. So why does this even matter to you? Because leadership isn't about following a script. It's about figuring out who you want to be as a leader. So listen closely, take what resonates, and start shaping your very own leadership path. So let's get moving and talk to our next leadership guest. In this episode, I am thrilled to be speaking to Dr. Janet L. Walsh, President and CEO of Birch Tree Global, LLC. We're going to hear all about Janet's approach to leadership. So Janet, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. It's delightful to be with you. And just to tell the audience that Karen is our first vice president in the Irish Business Organization of New York. And we are so gifted to have her with us. She's a vision, and we enjoy working with her 1,000%.
Okay, then right back at you, Janet Walsh, who is the president of our Irish Business Organization. So you can tell we have a lot of fun together, and we're going to have a lot of fun having this conversation. So thank you, Janet. All right. So before we get going, let's tell us a little bit about who you are, Janet, and then tell us a little bit and give us a snapshot about Birch Tree Global.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Karen. I guess in summary, I've spent about half of my career in senior leadership positions in large multinationals, responsible for multiple human resources operations around the world and new business operations. And then with Birch Tree Global, we work to set up businesses overseas. We do the legal, financial, tax, and HR infrastructure for globalizing businesses. We help them with their strategy. We help them be competitive in the foreign location, and then we put it together for them. So whether it's a foreign company coming into the US, like we have from our Irish colleagues, or it is a US company that wants to expand, into Argentina or a foreign location, or a country that wants to set up operations not involved in the US. We've done a lot of work with companies going from Mexico City, for example, to Panama.
Wow.
So we help companies go global with confidence and be very competitive in that activity.
And, you just said something global with confidence, because that would be a complicated and complex strategy would be my guess. And so the confidence piece would be very important.
Yeah, it's really difficult to gather all that information, particularly when you have a product or a service that's in demand and you don't have experience working internationally. We've seen some really catastrophic failures by companies who just assumed that, they get an employer of record, or they would just, go overseas and find a location, or they just talked to a tax person and didn't understand the legal or the HR implications. So I've been on the ground in 86 different countries.
Wow.
And set up operations in all US states. So my colleagues are very similar to me. So we are in a position to, not only give advice, but also, we have the experience and the boots on the ground, specific, information about those locations that help.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking obviously about leadership today. And Janet, the way you lead, so you said 86 countries in all US states, and every country has a different culture, has a different way of being, has a different way of being able to hear things. So leadership's going to be really, really a key element for you and your team to be able to do this work. So this is going to be great. Thank you. So let's get to our first question. And the first question is really how do you define leadership? Because it's so different. Janet, we just said 86 countries, every US state. Leadership's just different for everybody. So if I had to say, Janet L. Walsh, give us your definition, what would it be?
Well, I think, you answered part of the question right there. Is leadership is in context.
Mhm.
You have good leaders, you have bad leaders, you have
Yes.
leaders that are thrown into the breach, that have to take over. You have leaders that just assume a position after, a long time being as a manager. So leadership is a product of the environment influences the leadership.
Yeah.
Because the definition of a leader may be a little bit different in Argentina than it is in Australia, than it is in Anchorage, Alaska.
Yes.
So, but there are characteristics of people that are in a leadership position that are a little different than managers or advisors or people like that. So one, I think certainly it's the ability to inspire people to a vision. You have to articulate a vision and then be able to talk about that in such a way in whatever location you're at that inspires people to act. So I think that's the first thing. I think secondly, you have to be able to guide people. It doesn't do any good to be a leader and not be able to put together the infrastructure that helps the followers achieve those leadership, that leadership vision that you've articulated. I can say it's wonderful if we get to go to the moon, but if I can't figure out a way to put together the infrastructure to start to study that, to help us learn about that, to put in place, the equipment that we need to get to the moon, I have a limited amount of influence in that regard. So I think you've got to be able to communicate across to a wide variety of people across a wide variety of definitions of communication. The third thing is, you've got to educate people so that they can embrace those, they can learn to grow that vision. So you've got to, one, inspire people with a vision. Two, you've got to be able to communicate to people so that they can achieve the vision. But then you also have to help educate them so that they have the skills that they need to achieve the vision. They can get those skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And development is so key when you think about the people that you have that you're leading, is to make sure that those people are also curious, that want to learn, want to do more, want to stretch. Those are the people that you really want on your team to help get to the vision you're looking for, and also from a communication perspective. So that's great. Thank you. Good. All right. So question number 2. I'm curious about your values as a leader. So the way that I look at values, Janet, is it's like the guiding light. It's how decisions can be made. And when decisions are easy, no problem. However, when there's complicated decisions that impact people, that gets a little bit more complex. And I always feel like, well, if I pay attention to my values, and I can make decisions based on my values, then I'll be okay. So from a values perspective, what are your top 3 values?
I would say the first one is being able to listen to all the people in the organization. You've got to be someone who is ready to listen and transparent enough to explain your particular perspective. So you've got to listen to everybody. If you have a horse and the guy that cleans the stable, that mucks out the stall and all the horse stuff, he's the one that's going to see if the horse is eating properly. He's the one that's going to be able to tell you, that your horse has an issue. He's got blood. There's something wrong. So that's a person who many people might think is in the lowest part of the totem pole, cleans out horse stalls. But actually that person is the number one person who's going to see how that horse is digesting its food, and he'll see it every day.
Yes.
So I think it's extremely important to listen to all people. As a short anecdote, I was sent to Japan I have a undergraduate degree in economics and a minor in Japanese. And I was sent to Japan and this company, and I was talking to all the people about, what was going on, and no one in the company, studied Japanese or anything like that. And I came back and I said, the project you're talking about isn't going to work. They're not going to do it. And they said, well, they said they were. They said it would be very difficult, but we'll be able to get it done. I said, that's not what that phrase means in Japanese.
Mhm.
The phrase, it's very difficult, means not only not in your lifetime, but not in your children's lifetime. So but nobody in that organization had studied Japanese, been to Japan, knew anything about it. So they weren't able to interpret that information. Yet the people that I spoke to on the ground in the organization, not in the senior leadership positions, they were telling me it's not going to work. And they were right.
Yeah.
So that was a big lesson for me, is to listen to all the people.
So I just want to make a comment. You say, listen to all the people, and then it goes back to what you indicated about in terms of your definition of leadership, which is around communication, because you listened and yet it was communicated to other people as well, but you were able to interpret it in a way that made best sense for that culture. So other people listened, Janet, but they didn't get the communication. It didn't hit. So okay, great. Listen is one.
And that goes to the second part that, I think is important. And that is, you've got to have a framework to think through these issues, because you're setting up a business in Argentina or Brazil or France is different than setting up a company any place else. So you can't just expect to think about this stuff from memory. You've got to have a framework.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's extremely important to, in getting the facts, is to have a framework. Maybe you use a simple SWOT analysis. It's really too basic, but a pestle analysis or some type of framework that allows you to make sure that you're getting the facts. And as a leader, you really want to get as much of the facts as you possibly can, but you can't just do it by aimlessly wandering around talking to people. Put a framework together. What are the social issues here? What are the economic issues here? What are the political issues? And that way, when you talk to people, you'll be able to get the facts rather than just, having a couple of conversations and that's it. Yeah. So I think too is having some type of a framework as that you can use to organize your information so that you can, do a better job. And I think that brings me to the third value, which is to educate. It doesn't do any good, I think, to blow in, blow off, and blow out. I mean, that does work in some, may work in some scenarios, but if you want people to grow and develop and follow you, I think it's really important that you educate them.
Yeah, agree completely. And so your second is interesting from a framework perspective, because what that says to the people you're working with and the people that you're leading is there is a foundation, there is infrastructure that we're going to go from. So you don't have to start from scratch. Of course, with your third, educate. Well, I want you to develop, I want you to think of different ways of doing it. However, this is our foundation. Let's go from there. Mm-hmm. So listen, develop a framework, and educate. Love it. Great. All righty. So the third question is, what's the best advice you were ever given by a leader?
I had the opportunity at one point in time to have lunch with President Ford, Gerald Ford.
Oh, okay.
And so, of course, I thought this is it was a surprise. So I didn't really have the opportunity to prepare or do anything like that. But I thought one of the things that was going on at the time was that there were some people running for political office and were involved in the political process, and they were getting absolutely hammered. Think about how some people in an opposite political party are denigrated and called bad names, and people were, they're just giving him a real hard time, right? So I said to President Ford, President Ford, I said, given the fact that most people arrive at adulthood or in their middle life having made a few mistakes that they would prefer not to see on the front page of the New York Post. And, some of them are really interesting, escapades that, may have occurred as one was maybe under the influence of some, plant or something like that. So why would anybody in their right mind want to get involved in politics today when it is so easy to see your name up in lights, pilloried for being a jerk or horrible things said about you? And he said to me, that's a good question. He said, first of all, everybody makes mistakes. He says, I've made mistakes. I mean, I've made bad mistakes. But he said that should never stop anyone from participating in the political process. He said it's more about how you handle the discussion of those mistakes than the fact that you made a mistake at all. I mean, most people I've noticed tend to be very understanding and forgiving, particularly of little mistakes. If people make a mistake, oh, I forgot to do this, or I'm sorry, I overcharged you for that. But if you say, I'm sorry, and this is what I can do to fix it, or I've changed my mind or my perspective, he said, those are the ways that you address some of the issues. You can also, as the comedians do, make a joke about it. You can use it as an object lesson. But most people tend to be, I think, very, very forgiving and very understanding. So yes. His point was you should never be afraid, because you've made some mistakes, not to get out in public and lend your best efforts to a particular cause. He said, you can't be afraid of what people say about you. It's how you respond to what they say about you.
I love that. And, as we mature in our career or in our life, I mean, there's things that today I could care less about that I would have lost 3 days of sleep about, 10 years ago or so on and so forth. But what I love is never be afraid to make a mistake. And it sounds like it's scarier to be afraid not to make a mistake, because that means you're not going to innovate. You're not going to think bigger. You're not going to think more, or, what are the possibilities? So yeah. That's fabulous. Love that. Good. All right. Number 4. This one. We're currently going through an enormous amount of transition and change, and we will not get into those. However, what we will get into, Miss Janet, is how do you lead through transition and change?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess to tee it up, it's what's your definition of enormous? What's your definition of transition and change? And so when I think back about the adventures I've had, internationally, I've been shot at. I've had people try to kidnap me.
Oh,
I've had all kinds of, exciting adventures like that. My dad was the head of the first head of the troops that opened the gates of Dachau, the front gates of Dachau.
Oh,
so you put those kinds of things together, as a young person, say by the time you're 30, or as an infant, I guess
a child.
But you put those things together, and so that gives you kind of an environment in which you think about leadership. And like we talked about today, well, I was riding the horse and all of a sudden he jumped sideways and I was hanging on, half off, half on.
And I tried not to laugh, and I did.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I was laughing too at the same time. But again, one of the things that really you have to do is to be able to keep your, head about you when everybody else is losing it. somebody's shooting at you, you can't start running blindly in one direction because you may be running right towards the problem. What you need to do is to really keep your head about you. Is there anybody near you that's been hurt? Do you have to drag them off? Are you going to run? Or, yak, yak, yak. Somebody's trying to kidnap you. You got to keep your head about you and say, you got the wrong person. I'm just a teacher. I mean, they would probably, they'll never, you're going to have to pay them to take me back. So those kinds of, I think that's the number one thing you got to do is keep your head about you. And that means don't lose sight of the end game. So if the end game is to get out of this predicament safely, or the end game is to help all these people you've just, found out or have been tortured, you've got to keep your head about you, one. And two, again, you've got to be able to communicate to people that are all around you that may be having a different experience. There are people that have, can get, held up and robbed, and this hurts them for life. You've got to be able to understand those challenges that other people face and help them stay focused as you go towards the end game, whether it's, to set up a new business or get out of this predicament or, transition into a new area. So I think that's really, really, really important, not to lose sight of the end game and to be able to communicate well through this transition and to help educate people so they have the tools to get themselves out of, or to aid in the development of a particular project.
Yeah. And so there's a theme here in terms of the way that you, it sounds like not only lead, but kind of live your life, is that there is an end game. We have to build the foundation for that end game. And two things, again, in what you just talked about in terms of the predicament, is you have to listen and then you have to communicate. And it doesn't matter where you are or what situation you're in. At the end of the day, you got to listen and you got to communicate.
And this hit home for me really strongly. I went to Colombia to set up a business, and I was in a hurry and I took a taxi. I didn't wait for the hotel taxi, and the taxi driver drove me to a burned out part of town, and he tried to hold me up and said that he was going to kidnap me and all this kind of stuff. But I knew, having, studied all this, my mistake was taking the taxi.
Yeah.
But what I knew, that there was a big conference of academics in Colombia at that time. And I had a couple of student papers with me. And I said, I'm not a business person. I was the vice president of a very big organization, and I had $1,000 strapped to my leg.
Oh, geez.
And I was worth a lot of money, from a ransom perspective. But I was prepared, and I told him, well, I mean, I'm a teacher, here's the papers I've had to grade. And I kept going like this because I wore a sweater with a hole in it, and I had no jewelry on. And so and I had to do this in Spanish and conjugate the verbs correctly, which was the hard part of this discussion. Yeah. And finally talked the guy into taking me back to the hotel. And we got through the security gates of the hotel. And as I got out, I told the security people that this guy tried to kidnap me, and they nodded quietly and went over and, then jumped on him and drug him off. But again, you've got to have the information and be prepared ahead of time. If I hadn't known there was a conference, if I hadn't come prepared with a story as I was moving about that I was just a teacher, I mean, who wants a teacher? I'm no good. So, but a vice president of an international company, you're a hot ticket, Yeah. So I think, being prepared, being able to communicate, and, being able to talk your way out of it is quite helpful.
Well, I'd say that's a little bit of transition and change. I mean, that doesn't happen every day. So that's good. It's good to know. I know what I'm going to do the next time I get kidnapped, Janet. I know now. I'll be prepared.
When we think about the transitions that we're going through now, again, You got to stay focused on the end game. Let's get the people around us that we need in order to do the job that we can, the vision, achieve the vision we can see. Two, let's get everybody prepared and educated. And then, let's lay out the vision, so they can achieve this.
Yeah. Agree. All right. So question number 5, we know the best leaders are curious and always learning. And so what do you do? What are your resources? What are your tools? How do you keep growing and developing?
Well, I think from an education perspective, I've got a doctorate in foreign direct investment, an MBA, and a degree in economics, but that's not enough. I mean, I think it's, continual education, because, the kinds of things that were skill sets, 30 years ago are not the same skill sets that we need today.
Yeah.
So developing and continuing to grow from an education perspective, I think is critical, particularly for a leader. So I think, learning more about AI. I like to challenge myself with subjects that I wouldn't want to get a grade in, like theoretical physics. What is theoretical physics? Why is it important? What does it mean? And, how does that affect us as beings in the universe? So things like that. So my big deal is education, but also I think research. I mean, just like anything else, you can read about education, you can read these stories, but once you apply yourself and, continue to write research papers, I think that's illuminating. Then you add to the body of knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and the other thing, you talk about education and your academic education, and also let's not forget the education of your travel and the fact that you were in 86 countries. That's education in itself. And I'm certain that, and know that your education doesn't stop there. That's for sure. Yes.
Oh, and the one thing that's always helped communicate, from a cultural standpoint, is having, read the history of the places that you're going to.
Yes. Yeah.
When you can stand on the street and point in Mexico City to the aqueduct and talk to people, ask questions about that, they know that you're a friend of the country.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Good. All right. So the last question is, what piece of art or music or literature or whatever else keeps you balanced and brings you joy? With joy being the operative word, because when I think about a leader, I want a leader who is well-rounded. I want a leader, of course, who's smart, has vision, all that. But I want a leader who has interest outside their expertise. And I want them to have some joy. They don't have to eat birthday cake every day. However, I want them to have a sense of joy. So what do you do?
Well, I'd like to eat birthday cake.
Well, that makes 2 of us. I'm not saying not to.
I mean, you got me right there. I have to say all of those areas, because I am a member of the Booth Museum Artists Guild. So I do horse portraits for people. And so I do horse paintings, and they put some of them in the museum. They're kind enough from time to time. I play the piano and the accordion and the guitar, and have been in some bands. So that's always been a lot of fun. And then I am absolutely an addict when it comes to reading books. I try to read a book or 2 a week, whether it's online or in hand. I'm just crazy about, reading. And, certainly from a cultural perspective, I think it's important to go to museums and to do things like that. And I have a horse, as I mentioned, that I ride, and we compete in events. And then I have 5 dogs, which are usually, I show the dogs in dog shows and stuff. And we're a happy little pack. So
I do have to tell the listeners, I ask Janet on a regular basis, when do you sleep is what I want to know. Who's sleeping over there at Janet's house? Not Janet.
Well, Scrappy the dog says that, because he says, Mom, you're getting up too early and all this kind of stuff. So
stop, Mom, stop. Yes.
Well, I figure out I can sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's the way to look at it. So Janet, thank you. I mean, what fun, what a life, what, just experiences and sharing and, kind of having such a good sense of humor about all of it. At the end of the day, isn't that the best? You got to laugh, right? I mean, why not? Yeah. What else can you do?
Well, I think that's one reason, Karen, that you're hiding your light under a bushel, because I never would have, taken on the job of president of the IBO had I not, met you and enjoyed your conversation with your sense of humor and Loretta's sense of humor and Colleen's sense of humor. That you guys are so supportive, so knowledgeable, so talented. I mean, I thought to myself, I should pay you to take this job, because you've done such a wonderful job enriching, my knowledge and education. I think you guys are phenomenal.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And right back at you. I mean, that's kind of when you do something like the IBO, the Irish Business Organization, we're doing it out of something that we care about, something we want to continue to learn about, something we want to grow and develop. And so it's a great educational piece, I think, for all of us. And then to be able to learn from each other because we come from such different walks of life. I mean, to me, that's what leadership is all about.
And look at some of the conversations we've had recently, like about the floating hospital.
Yes.
I mean, that just sort of came out of nowhere.
Yes.
And we were in a position to pull a bunch of groups together to just talk about it.
Yes, so. I know. It's fantastic. So everybody, thanks for listening. And I'm Karen Colligan, and you've been listening to Dr. Janet L. Walsh, President and CEO of Birch Tree Global. If this leadership podcast was of interest to you, go to our YouTube channel, People Think NY, and listen and share and comment. Until the next episode of the Let's Talk Leadership podcast, have a good one. And don't forget to keep it real. Editing by Mary Lee Williams. Thanks all.